What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Well, we're less than a week away from the fabulous York Show. The York Show, also known as the White Rose Game Room Show, is located in York, Pennsylvania, on October 9th and 10th this year, 2015. This year we're doing something special. If you haven't heard, we are putting together the first ever Bingo Row. There will be bingos coming with collectors from all over the eastern United States. And we're running a little contest. Anyone who can get 4 or 5 in a row or a section, I should specify that, you can use the features of the game. If you get 4 or 5 in a row or section, then you have a chance at winning an autographed copy of either Bally Bingo Pinball Machines or the Bingo Pinball War, Bally vs. United. These are autographed by the author, Geoffrey Lawton, who will also be at the show. In fact, several of the voices that you've heard on this podcast so far will be at the York Show. So it's going to be a very exciting time. Now for tonight's topic, I wanted to discuss a quick technical tip. I don't believe I've gone over this in the podcast, but recent events helping a friend attempt to fix a game have reminded me that I should probably say something about this. And that is that if you are troubleshooting a problem and you cannot figure out why in the world something is not happening as it should, especially if the problem is intermittent, you inspect the switches, everything is clean in the path. There's no pitting, no arcing, no visible problem whatsoever, but for whatever reason a coil doesn't fire, or points don't score, or something of that nature, one of the things that you should do is to tug gently but firmly, if that makes sense, on the wires which are attached to the switches in question. What this will do is tell you if there are any breaks in the wiring, or if there are any cold solder joints which will come undone with just a slight touch. Now, cold solder joints happen because the items in question were not heated enough at the time of soldering. But it's also possible over time for those joints to weaken through repeated flexing. If you've been listening for a long time, you've heard me talk about silver solder and how it has a higher tensile strength than typical lead solder or whatever the lead replacement is these days. What that tensile strength is, just how strong it can grip. And it's possible to have the symptoms of a cold solder joint when actually what's happened is that you've flexed that circuit enough that it's broken. Anyone who's familiar with working on solid-state games will tell you that cold solder joints abound. But what seems to be more frequent is improper flexing of the pins from people trying to shove in the wrong connector into a particular spot. Actually breaks the solder contact by ripping it forcefully from the board. Well, the same can be said of the EMs. Now, if you take a typical connection point, let's say a Jones plug, that is pulled apart, set aside, put back together again, pulled apart, put back together again, pulled apart, put back together again. Many, many times in its life. Every time it's moved, that has to happen. Unless you move it assembled for whatever reason, which is not a great idea. Well, every time that you do this, you run the risk of yanking on a wire too hard, or getting the male Jones plug caught in the wiring loom that's underneath the female Jones plug before you push it into place. And any of these little incidents where you pull just a little too hard can cause breakage in either the wire or the solder joint itself. And so some of the time, cold solder joints are caused by poor soldering technique in the factory. When you think about it, an EM, and especially a bingo, has hundreds and hundreds of solder points. That's fairly easy for a couple to get done improperly. It doesn't take much. So, you're just kind of multiplying the area where it's possible for that to happen, since it was all done by hand. There were no machines that would wave solder this board. A person had to physically hold the wire there, hold the solder there, and hold the iron there. So, my warning to you is this: when you're trying to troubleshoot something, it probably behooves you to give a gentle tug on each of the wires connected to the solder points in question. Hope that helps someone. It's certainly a technique which has helped me in the past and will continue to help me in the future. If it helps you, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Well, thank you very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.